It was one of those balmy Saturday evenings in late spring that seemed to stretch endlessly under the vast Colorado sky. The kind where the air carries the sweet scent of blooming lilacs mixed with the smoky aroma of a backyard grill firing up for what promised to be a simple, heartwarming family gathering. Our modest suburban home in Denver had always been a haven of predictability and warmth, with the wooden picnic table set under a canopy of string lights that Emily, my wife of 34 years, had strung up herself years ago, claiming they added a touch of magic to our ordinary nights. The grass was freshly mowed that afternoon, leaving neat patterns that caught the golden hues of the setting sun, and the distant hum of neighborhood kids playing basketball echoed faintly, creating a backdrop of serene normalcy that made everything feel just right. I stood at the grill, spatula in hand, flipping burgers with the practiced ease of a man who had done this ritual countless times, while Emily moved gracefully between the kitchen and the yard, arranging plates of homemade potato salad, coleslaw, and corn on the cob, her soft humming of an old Johnny Cash song filling the air like a gentle lullaby. Our son Jacob, at 29, had driven down from his apartment in Boulder earlier that day, his reliable old Jeep pulling into the driveway with the familiar crunch of gravel, and he had brought along his girlfriend of 5 months, a woman named Caitlin Reed, whom we were meeting for only the second time but who seemed eager to blend into our little family circle. Jacob worked as a software engineer from home, spending his days coding algorithms for a tech startup, and he had always been the steady type, reliable and thoughtful, much like his mother in temperament but with my analytical mind tucked away beneath that calm exterior. As we all settled around the picnic table, the conversation flowed easily at first, with Caitlin complimenting Emily on the vibrant garden beds filled with tulips and daffodils that bordered the yard, and Jacob sharing lighthearted stories about his latest project deadlines, his laughter ringing out in a way that warmed my heart and reminded me of his childhood days when he would run around this very backyard chasing fireflies. Caitlin, with her polished smile and engaging manner, talked animatedly about her hobbies, mentioning weekend hikes in the Rocky Mountains and her passion for photography, even pulling out her phone to show us a few snapshots of sunsets over the peaks that she claimed captured the essence of Colorado's wild beauty. Everything appeared picture-perfect on the surface, the kind of evening that families cherish and look back on with fondness, where bonds are strengthened over shared meals and casual chatter. Yet, amidst this idyllic scene, there was a subtle undercurrent of something amiss, a faint ripple in the otherwise still pond of our gathering that I couldn't quite ignore. It started with Jacob's knee brushing against my shin under the table in a deliberate pattern, 3 quick, almost imperceptible taps, our secret code from when he was just 9 years old and needed a discreet way to signal that he wanted out of an uncomfortable situation, like being stuck listening to his eccentric uncle ramble on about antique car restorations at holiday dinners. We had invented it together after one particularly long family event, where Jacob had been cornered for what felt like hours, and from then on, those 3 taps meant, "Dad, help me escape this without making a scene." It had been 15 years since we'd last used it, back when he was a teenager navigating awkward social circles, and its sudden reappearance now, in the midst of this seemingly pleasant barbecue, sent a quiet alarm through me. I glanced at him subtly, noting the way his eyes flickered with a mix of forced cheer and underlying tension, especially whenever Caitlin steered the conversation toward her work as a wealth transition specialist, a title she delivered with rehearsed confidence that hinted at something more calculated beneath her friendly demeanor. The taps came right after she began describing her role in helping clients unlock hidden financial opportunities, and though I kept my expression neutral, years of experience as a senior fraud investigator with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, followed by my retirement into private consulting for the SEC's Denver regional office, had honed my instincts to detect the faint whiff of deception even in the most charming packages. Emily caught my eye from across the table, her intuitive gaze picking up on the shift in my posture, a silent acknowledgement built from decades of marriage where words weren't always necessary to communicate concern. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard, and the string lights began to glow brighter against the encroaching dusk, I couldn't shake the feeling that this perfect evening was perched on the edge of disruption, the 3 taps serving as the first quiet warning that the balance we all took for granted was about to be tested in ways none of us had anticipated. As the evening progressed and we dug into the burgers, still warm from the grill and topped with melted cheese and fresh tomatoes from Emily's garden, the initial harmony began to show its first subtle fractures, like hairline cracks in a well-polished facade that hinted at deeper instabilities lurking beneath. Caitlin, with her engaging smile and animated gestures, casually wove in comments about Jacob's financial habits during what should have been innocuous small talk, remarking offhandedly that he was probably leaving a lot of potential growth on the table with his conservative 401k investments. Her tone light but laced with an undertone of subtle judgment that made Jacob shift uncomfortably in his seat. She described her work in glowing terms, painting vivid pictures of exclusive private yield partnerships that promised astonishing returns of 20 to 25% annually, involving innovative ventures like solar-powered real estate developments in the sun-drenched deserts of Nevada and microlending networks tied to booming oil operations in the vast plains of Texas, opportunities she claimed were deliberately kept out of reach from everyday investors by the gatekeepers of Wall Street who preferred to hoard the real profits for themselves. Her words flowed smoothly, delivered with the enthusiasm of someone sharing an insider's secret rather than pushing an agenda. And she even leaned in closer to Jacob, touching his arm lightly as she spoke, a gesture that might have seemed affectionate to an outsider, but struck me as strategically placed to build emotional leverage. When I interjected with polite but pointed questions, drawing from my background in unraveling financial schemes, asking about the regulatory oversight for these partnerships or whether they underwent independent audits to verify their claims, Caitlin responded without missing a beat, her voice steady and reassuring as she explained that excessive regulation only created unnecessary bottlenecks, slowing down the flow of capital and diminishing the very advantages that made these investments so lucrative in the first place. Emily, ever the gracious host, offered more iced tea around the table, but I could see the faint furrow in her brow as she observed the exchange, her years of standing by me through late-night case reviews having sharpened her own sense of when conversations veered into potentially treacherous territory. Jacob, for his part, managed a nod and a forced smile, but his responses grew noticeably briefer, his usual witty banter replaced by monosyllabic agreements that betrayed an inner discomfort he was trying hard to mask. Later, as we cleared the plates under the soft glow of the string lights, with crickets beginning their nightly chorus in the background, Caitlin accidentally pulled up a glossy PDF on her tablet, tilting it toward Jacob so he could see the prospectus for something called Horizon Yield Partners, a document filled with sleek graphics and bold promises of minimum entries at $50,000, with preferred allocations unlocking even greater benefits for commitments exceeding $150,000. The deadline loomed ominously at the end of the following week, creating an artificial sense of urgency that I recognized immediately as a classic tactic from the fraud playbook I had studied for decades. Jacob's 401k, which he had diligently built up to around $285,000 through years of careful saving and company matches, suddenly felt like a target in this conversation, and the way Caitlin's eyes lit up as she described the life-changing potential made the air feel thicker with unspoken implications. He didn't outright reject her suggestions, but under the table, his knee pressed against my shin again in those 3 deliberate taps, a silent plea that echoed louder than any words could, signaling that the small humiliations of being subtly undermined in front of his family were accumulating into something he could no longer ignore alone. As the night wound down and we said our goodbyes, with Caitlin hugging Emily warmly and promising to send over her potato salad recipe, the cracks had widened just enough to let in a draft of doubt, setting the stage for the tensions that were bound to escalate in the days ahead. With the barbecue behind us, the following 2 weeks unfolded like a slow-building storm over the Rocky Mountains, where distant thunder rumbles long before the rain arrives, and the subtle discomforts from that evening morphed into a full-blown siege on Jacob's peace of mind, placing him squarely in the vulnerable position of someone caught between affection and mounting suspicion. Caitlin had conveniently, temporarily, relocated some of her belongings into Jacob's cozy apartment in Boulder, citing complications with her downtown lease renewal that required her to bridge a gap of a few weeks, a move that initially seemed practical but quickly revealed itself as a calculated step to deepen her influence in his daily life. She began leaving printed copies of fund documents scattered strategically around the kitchen counter and coffee table, each one boasting elaborate performance charts that claimed consistent 22% returns over the past 9 years, yet conspicuously lacking any mention of an independent auditor or verifiable sources for their data, with vague phrasing about proprietary asset collateral that could encompass anything from legitimate holdings to outright fabrications. Jacob's sleep suffered noticeably during this period. He confided in me over a late-night phone call from his car, parked in a quiet lot overlooking the Flatirons, that the shadows under his eyes were from tossing and turning, haunted by the pressure she was applying without ever raising her voice. In that hushed conversation, his voice carried a thin edge of desperation as he described how Caitlin had escalated her pitch, tearfully insisting one evening over a shared dinner of takeout sushi that he needed to wire $180,000 by the upcoming Tuesday, framing it not as a financial transaction but as a testament to their budding future together, accusing him of lacking trust when he hesitated and weaving in emotional narratives about how this investment would secure their dreams of traveling the world or buying a home in the mountains. The injustice of it all ignited a fire in my chest, knowing from my investigative days how predators like her preyed on emotional availability, building genuine-seeming connections only to exploit them for gain, turning love into a weapon that left victims feeling not just robbed but profoundly betrayed. Jacob felt ensnared in a web of his own making, torn between the warmth she had shown in their early months, late-night talks about life goals, weekend escapes to hot springs in the hills, and the sickening realization that her affections might be as fabricated as the fund's promises, a conflict that manifested in his growing isolation, as he withdrew from friends and even skipped our usual Sunday calls to avoid admitting the turmoil aloud. Meanwhile, I began my own quiet probes, forwarding the documents he had scanned and sent me late one night, running checks that confirmed Horizon Yield Partners held no registration with the SEC or the Colorado Division of Securities, its purported Denver office address tracing back to a nondescript virtual mailbox service that anyone could rent for a pittance, and the inflated return claims screaming red flags of a potential Ponzi scheme designed to lure in the trusting. The escalation peaked when Caitlin, sensing his wavering, intensified her tactics, sending daily texts with inspirational stories of other clients who had transformed their lives through similar investments, each one laced with urgency about the closing window that would vanish if he delayed, pushing him further into a corner where the weight of potential loss, not just financial but emotional, threatened to overwhelm him completely. In the midst of this mounting pressure, where Jacob's world seemed to narrow to the confines of his apartment and the relentless drumbeat of Caitlin's persuasions, an unexpected pivot emerged not from confrontation or collapse, but from a deliberate strategy born of quiet resolve, flipping the script in a way that revealed strengths neither he nor I had fully anticipated until that moment. Rather than succumbing to the emotional blackmail or erupting in accusation, Jacob chose to channel his growing anger into a calculated play, informing Caitlin that he was nearly convinced and requesting a formal sit-down at a neutral cafe in downtown Boulder to review the subscription agreement one last time, framing it as his need for clarity before committing such a significant sum. Unaware of the trap being set, she agreed eagerly, arriving at the quaint spot with its exposed brick walls and aroma of fresh brewed coffee, armed with fresh printouts and her most reassuring smile, ready to close the deal over lattes and croissants. What she didn't know was that Jacob had already shared every detail with me, allowing me to dissect the materials thoroughly. The lack of regulatory filings, the phantom address, and the mathematical impossibilities in their return projections that screamed deception to anyone versed in financial forensics. But the true revelation unfolded during that recorded meeting, where Jacob, with his phone discreetly capturing audio from his shirt pocket as permitted under Colorado's one-party consent laws, let her unfold her pitch in full, detailing the wire transfer instructions to an obscure credit union in Nevada, promising that his funds would be actively generating returns within 48 hours, and even delivering a poignant monologue about how this step represented her commitment to their shared future after so many personal setbacks in her own life. It was in this vulnerability she feigned that the first major twist surfaced. She offhandedly referenced a previous success story involving a 72-year-old widower from Phoenix who had allegedly invested his entire retirement nest egg and was now enjoying a comfortable life in assisted living, all thanks to the fund's stability. Jacob's face remained impassive, but later that evening, as we pored over the recording together in my home office surrounded by stacks of old case files and the soft glow of a desk lamp, a deeper investigation, pulling strings with former colleagues at the SEC and cross-referencing public records, uncovered the horrifying truth. That widower had indeed transferred his savings at her urging, only to lose it all when the scheme unraveled, leading to his tragic suicide just 6 months later. Detail buried in obscure coroner's reports and family obituaries that explained why no charges had ever been filed, as the grieving relatives opted for silence out of shame and heartbreak. This revelation not only shattered any lingering doubts but also transformed the case from a personal suspicion into a broader web of serial fraud, providing the evidentiary smoking gun that elevated it to federal attention. Armed with the audio, which captured her explicit solicitations and false assurances, we forwarded it securely to a joint FBI-SEC task force I had quietly contacted. Their swift response confirming that Caitlin's operations spanned multiple states with variations on the same theme, and the arrest warrant was issued almost immediately, catching her off guard and shifting the power dynamic irrevocably in our favor. As the dust settled from the whirlwind of events, with Caitlin's arrest unfolding in the early morning hours at Jacob's apartment under the watchful eyes of federal agents who moved with practiced efficiency, ensuring no escape and minimal drama while Jacob stood outside in the crisp dawn air clutching a steaming coffee mug for comfort, the resolution brought not just relief but a profound sense of justice restored, allowing our family to reclaim the peace that had been so precariously threatened. She was taken into custody without incident, her carefully constructed facade crumbling as investigators delved deeper, revealing that Horizon Yield Partners was merely one of 4 fictitious entities she had cycled through Colorado, Nevada, and Arizona, defrauding 11 confirmed victims out of over $1.4 million in total, with Jacob's timely intervention marking him as the sole individual who emerged unscathed financially, his savings intact thanks to the chain of actions sparked by those initial 3 taps. In the 2 months that followed, as legal proceedings began and we navigated the aftermath with statements and depositions, our family gatherings resumed their gentle rhythm, culminating in another backyard evening where just the 3 of us, Jacob, Emily, and myself, sat around the picnic table once more, savoring Emily's renowned apple pie warm from the oven, its cinnamon scent mingling with the cool night breeze as we reflected on the ordeal. Jacob appeared visibly lighter, the weight of deception lifted from his shoulders, though traces of the emotional bruise lingered in his quieter moments, and over coffee as the stars emerged overhead. He opened up with a vulnerability that strengthened our bond, admitting how he continually questioned allowing the situation to escalate so far before seeking help. I responded thoughtfully, emphasizing that Caitlin's prowess lay in her meticulous refinement of the scheme, investing months in cultivating authentic-seeming affection and trust, exploiting the human desire for connection and exclusivity, which wasn't a reflection of his naivety but rather her sophisticated manipulation tactics honed through prior successes. What truly mattered, I stressed, was that pivotal instant when his intuition cut through the fog, prompting him to revive our old code and reach out, a decision that averted disaster and underscored the power of listening to one's inner warnings rather than dismissing them as paranoia. He nodded, a small smile breaking through as he acknowledged the relief in still remembering the signal after all these years. And as Emily joined us with fresh refills, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, weaving in laughter and plans for future hikes, reaffirming the resilience of our family unit. The moral woven through this experience resonates deeply. Trust forms the foundation of meaningful relationships, yet it can be cynically weaponized by those skilled in deception, particularly in the realm of finances where promises of extraordinary, guaranteed returns, anything consistently above 8 or 9% annually, should trigger rigorous scrutiny, as they often mask underlying risks or outright scams. Any opportunity shrouded in urgency, evading regulatory oversight, or discouraging independent verification warrants pause. In the United States, a quick check via investor.gov or state securities regulators can illuminate truths in mere minutes at no cost, potentially safeguarding lifetimes of hard-earned savings. Yet, beyond databases and due diligence, the most potent safeguard lies in those subtle signals. Be it 3 taps on the knee, a midnight message, or a tentative confession of unease, that loved ones extend when entangled in doubt, urging us to listen actively and respond with support, for they hold the key to preventing loss and preserving what truly matters. In our case, we forfeited no dollars but nearly sacrificed a son's security. The salvation came from a simple code on a serene Denver evening, a reminder that instincts, when heeded and shared, can indeed save everything.